Good morning, everyone. We're going to continue through the Minor Prophets today. We're looking at starting out in the book of Joel. The Minor Prophets don't always get as much exposure and attention as some of the other passages of the Bible. We don't always hear these preached in morning services or brought up in your little devotion books that you have at home, but they're just as important and just as inspired as any other part of the Bible is, and so we want to give it equal attention as well, because they all teach us about who God is and what He expects of us. And what He's looking for. The book of Joel, let's see, last week we went through the book of Amos. If you can find the book of Amos and go to the book just before it, you will find the book of Joel, 3 short chapters. The book of Joel, I put up there, the locusts are coming, the locusts are coming. If you remember the story of Paul Revere as he rides through the colonial cities back in the mid-1700s saying, the British are coming, everybody wake up, do something. Because the army is coming, be ready, do something, prepare, get ready for battle. That's kind of what Joel is doing too. He is an Old Testament Paul Revere saying the locusts are coming, be prepared, get ready for battle. Not battle against the locusts, but battle against their own sinfulness that caused the locusts to come in the first place. If everybody's found the book now, we'll continue. The book of Joel. The author obviously is Joel. Unknown identity. Chapter 1, verse 1 says, the word of the Lord that came to Joel, the son of Pethuel. And that's really about all we know about him. We don't really know his background very much. We don't know where he's from. And so he's kind of, in that sense, kind of an anonymous figure that God just gave a message to and said, preach this to my people. The readers are Judah. Last week, and probably in a little bit after we get done with Joel, we're going to try to cover 2 books this morning. Joel is to the nation of Judah, the nation to the south. Amos was to the tribes of Israel to the north. Probably, maybe one of the earlier prophets to the southern tribes, although, as I said last week, Joel is kind of a hard one to nail down, depending on which commentator or which graph or you look at. Joel really, really varies time-wise as to where they places this book. Some of them place him way at the beginning of the prophets, and some others place him way at the end of the prophets. Others place him right in the middle anywhere. And so it's kind of a guess. My best guess is that it's probably, and maybe I overstated this a little bit, likely after the decline of Assyria. I don't know if likely is a good word. Possibly, maybe I'll put. And I say that because Joel is, like I said, to the southern tribes of Judah, and all the other prophets to Judah happened kind of after the demise of the 10 northern tribes. And so just because he's preaching to them, I'm kind of guessing maybe it's after the 10 northern tribes are gone. But again, I don't know. It could have been while they were still, in their final years, just before they were exiled. It's hard to say. But probably before the invasion by Babylon, because much of the book is taken up by warning of the army to come. And so I believe it happened before Judah was exiled. The message is simple. The past judgment by God is nothing compared to the coming judgment that God will send. And the structure looks like this. Chapter 1 is God's first army invasion. Chapter 2 is God's second army invasion. And I think I put chapter 1, verse 18 up there, didn't I? I didn't mean that. Probably chapter 2, verse 18 through 3:21 is God's restoration after the judgment. So chapter 1, we're going to begin, says this. Hear this, you elders. Give ear, all inhabitants of the land. Has such a thing ever happened in your days or in the days of your fathers? Tell your children of it, and let your children tell their children, and their children to another generation. And here's what they're going to tell them or remind them of. You'll never guess what I saw in my days, grandkids. Here's what I saw, verse 4. What the cutting locust left, the swarming locust has eaten. And what the swarming locust has left, the hopping locust has eaten. And what the hopping locust left, the destroying locust has eaten. Wave after wave after wave of these pests coming through, devastating the land, eating every green thing in sight. Verse 5, awake, you drunkards, and weep and wail, all you drinkers of wine, because of the sweet wine, for it's cut off from your mouth. For a nation has come up against my land, powerful and beyond number. Its teeth are lion's teeth. It has fangs of a lioness. It has laid waste my vine, splintered my fig tree. It has stripped off the bark and thrown it down. Their branches are made white. Verse 11, continue. Be ashamed, O tillers of the soil. Wail, O vine dressers. For the wheat and the barley, because of the harvest of the field, has perished. The vine dries up. The fig tree languishes. pomegranates, palms, apples, all the trees of the field are dried up, and gladness dries up from the children of man. He's talking about this locust plague that's come through. He's talking about the first army that God has sent, an army of locusts, these pests. Amos reminds the people of one of God's judgments that they had just received, a locust plague. As we said last week for Amos, this is not a surprise. This is exactly what God promised would happen for the disobedience back in Deuteronomy 28, specifically verses 38 and 42, where God said, if you disobey among all the other judgments I will bring upon you, locust is one of them. I'll bring these things through. It'll devastate your land. You'll have famine, and you'll have no crops and food. Everything will be barren. Your livestock will die because they have nothing to eat. And this is all as a judgment because of your disobedience to me. So when you see these things happen, remember, I told you this ahead of time. This is the contract that we signed way back when you came into the land. You agreed to this. If you disobey, these are the things that will happen to you. And so in Joel, as he's going through and talking about the locust, the people probably, or at least they shouldn't have been saying, why is this happening? What's going on? I don't understand. They should have known exactly why this is happening, because it talks about it. It's recorded in their own scriptures, and this is the covenant they made with God. If you disobey, this is what will happen. And so Joel says, look at this army of locusts that's just come through and stripped you bare. This is what you get. But verse 13, it says what to do. It says, put on sackcloth and lament, O priest. Wail, O ministers of the altar. Go, pass in the night as sackcloth, O ministers of my God, because grain offering and drink offerings are withheld from the house of your God. Nobody's coming to the temple. Nobody's worshiping God with their sacrifices anymore. They're ignoring him. Verse 15, alas for the day of the Lord is near. As destruction from the Almighty it comes. Is not the food cut off before our eyes? Joy and gladness from the house of our God? The seed shrivels under the clods. The storehouses are desolate. The granaries are torn down because all the grain is dried up. How the beasts groan. The herds of the cattle are perplexed because there is no pasture for them. Even the flocks of the sheep suffer. Famine, desolation, hunger everywhere. God says, this is what has happened because you have disobeyed. But what is already a very severe judgment that God has already sent, he says, is nothing compared to the judgment that is to come in chapter 2. And so take the judgment that is past as a warning. And as devastating as it was, the next one will be worse. Chapter 2 says this, verse 1, blow a trumpet in Zion, sound an alarm on my holy mountain. Let all the inhabitants of the land tremble, for the day of the Lord is coming. It is near. A day of darkness and gloom, a day of clouds and thick darkness. Like blackness there is spread upon the mountains a great and powerful people. Their like has never been before, nor will be again after them, through all the years of all generations. Fire devours before them, and behind them a flame burns. A land is like a garden of Eden before them, but behind them a desolate wilderness, and nothing escapes them. Verse 6, before them peoples are in anguish, all faces grow pale. Like warriors they charge, like soldiers they scale a wall. They march each on his way, they do not swerve from their paths. They don't jostle one another, each marches in his path. They burst through the weapons and are not halted. They leap upon the city and they run upon the walls. They climb up into the houses, they enter through the windows like a thief. The earth quakes before them, the heavens tremble. The sun and the moon are darkened. The stars withdraw their shining. The Lord utters his voice before his army, for his camp is exceedingly great. He who executes his word is powerful, for the day of the Lord is great and very awesome. Who can endure it? And I think he's drawing a picture here with his second army that God promises. After the locust, Joel likens the coming judgment of the Babylonian army to the devastation already inflicted by the locusts. And I really think we're supposed to see a parallel between the two here. The army that came in the past, those insects, those pests that devastated and wiped the land clean of all greenery. Now God's going to send another army, another swarm, isn't he? That's going to judge the land as well. And it's going to take more than just the crops. It's going to take everything. And so while the first army was a past, an army like locusts, the swarms came in like an army, devastating in ranks and files, and swarm after swarm, and round after round of these things came through. And even though they came through in verses 13 through 20, God still offers a call to repentance. Come back to me so we don't have to continue these judgments and these pestilences, these judgments upon you. Come to repentance. Come back to me so we can call these things off, so I can give you blessing again, like I also promised in Deuteronomy 28. But again, if you haven't learned a lesson from your past invasion, the next invasion you will, because the next invasion is the future army of people. So while the first time around we had army-like locusts, the next time we're going to have locust-like armies. And this army will be so intense and so overwhelming, it'll pass through your land just like the locusts did. But they're going to do more than just eat the grass and the fruit and the trees and the leaves. They're going to destroy the cities. They're going to leave fire. They're going to burn. They're going to kill. They're going to pillage. They're going to devastate. Everything will be gone. The people, the culture, the buildings, the cities, the civilization that you've built will be wiped out because of these people. So overwhelming will they be that you'll not recover for a while. But you will lose in a very big way. So he likens the judgment to come to the Babylonian army. And again, just like before in chapter 1, he parallels this with another call to repentance in the last half of the verse. And so I definitely think we're supposed to see a parallel here between the two armies that come. Continuing on in verse 12 of chapter 2, "Yet even now, declares the Lord, return to me with all of your heart, with fasting, with weeping, and with mourning. Rend your hearts and not your garments. Return to the Lord your God, for he is gracious and merciful, slow to anger, abounding in steadfast love, and he relents over disaster. Who knows whether he will not turn and relent and leave a blessing behind, grain offering and drink offering for the Lord your God. Even at this time, God says, come back to me. I want to be good to you. I want to bless you. I want to be your protector and not your judge and your avenger. This is what I want for you." It almost seems like a contradiction, doesn't it? On the one hand, or in the one set of verses, God is the angry judge who's bringing devastation, and he turns the corner so quickly in the next passage to say, but look, I don't want to be this way. I want to be loving, and I want to be kind to you, but I demand obedience from you. And it almost seems like the two facets of God are at odds, aren't they? Kind of competing against each other. Of course, we know that's not true. God's different characteristics don't compete against each other. They don't balance each other out as if it were some kind of tug of war. Both are valid sides of God, and both are equally offered to the people. And it's kind of the people's decision which side of, I don't want to say it that way, which aspect of God they have to deal with. Do you want to deal with the merciful, kind, blessing God, or do you want to deal with the angry judge God? It's kind of up to you depending on how you respond to him. But both are within his nature, the justice and the mercy, the kindness, the love, and the judgment. Both are part of who he is. Verse 18 continues, "Then the Lord became jealous for his land after the judgment is brought, and had pity on his people. The Lord answered and said to his people, Behold, I am sending you grain and wine and oil, and you'll be satisfied. And no more will I make you a reproach among the nations. I'll remove the northerner far from you and drive him into a parched and desolate land, his vanguard into an eastern area, his rearguard into the western sea. The stench and the foul smell of him will rise, for he has done great things. Someday, God says, I will come back and I will revive you, and I'll bring you back, and I'll restore your land and everything. And all the enemies will be taken care of and wiped away and judged." He's talking about the blessing that is to come for the people. This is what the people and God is really looking forward to. God doesn't enjoy the judgment and the devastation and the harshness. He wants to be kind and benevolent towards his people. But he says, the people have forced my hand, they've disobeyed me, and I cannot overlook it. So he talks then about the blessing, the provision for his people. Continues on in verse 26 and 27, "You shall eat in plenty and be satisfied, and praise the name of the Lord your God, who has dealt wondrously with you. And my people shall never again be put to shame. You shall know that I am in the midst of Israel, and that I am the Lord your God, and there is none else. And my people shall never again be put to shame." And again, when does this happen? I don't think it's happened yet, because so far, even when God has brought them back to the land, there's still trouble, there's still difficulties, there's still enemies overrunning and fighting and attacking. Even to this day in Israel, those things are still happening. They're not at peace, they're not in comfort, they're not in they're doing okay over there, but they always have to be on guard because of who's going to attack next. But this is talking about a day when all the enemies will be taken care of and vanquished and sent away, and Israel will be in ultimate peace and prosperity for all time. He kind of turns the corner again, starting in verse 28 of chapter 2. We'll pick it up in verse 30, talking about the vengeance upon Israel's enemies. He says, "I will show wonders in the heavens and on earth, blood and fire and columns of smoke. The sun shall be turned to darkness, the moon to blood, before the great and awesome day of the Lord comes. And it shall come to pass that everyone who calls on the name of the Lord shall be saved. For in Mount Zion and in Jerusalem there shall be those who escape, as the Lord has said, and among the survivors shall be those from whom the Lord calls. For behold, in those days and at that time when I restore the fortune of Judah and Jerusalem, I will gather all the nations, and I'll bring them down to the valley of Jehoshaphat, and I will enter into judgment with them there on my behalf of my people and my heritage Israel, because they have scattered among them the nations, and have divided up my land, and have cast lots for my people, and have traded a boy for a prostitute, and have sold a girl for wine, and have drunk it. All the other nations who have beat up on Israel for so long, God says, in that day, in the day of judgment, in the day of the Lord. And again, I think he's talking about the future day of the Lord in this context. He says, I'm going to bring all the nations together to the land of the valley of Jehoshaphat, into the land of Israel, and I'm going to judge them all at once in one great big devastating death-dealing blow to all the nations as a judgment for what they've done to you for all the centuries. What does that sound like? What event does this sound like? Where God gathers all the nations into Israel and judges them once and for all. Sounds like what we read about in the book of what? Yeah, Revelations, doesn't it? I think that's what he's talking about right here. Someday I will bring together all the nations, and I'll bring together one big, massive punishment on all of them for what they've done to my people over the centuries. Verse 4, what are you to me, O Tyre and Sidon, and all the regions of Philistia? Are you paying me back for something? Why are you treating my people like this? What have I ever done to you? If you are paying me back, then I will return your payment on your head swiftly and speedily. For you have taken my silver and my gold, God says, and have carried my rich treasures to your temples. You have sold the people of Judah and Jerusalem to the Greeks in order to remove them far from their own border. Behold, I will stir them up from the place which you have sold them, and I'll return your payment on your head. You're going to get what you have coming, enemies of Israel. And I will sell your sons and your daughters to the hands of the people of Judah, and they will sell them to the Sabeans, to a nation far away, for the Lord has spoken. And all the things that you've done to my people Israel, selling them off as slaves, attacking them, trading their land, attacking them, that's what I'm going to do to you, O you nations that have attacked my people. And everything you've done to them, I'm going to do back to you. And your kids are going to be sold into slavery, and your lands will be taken over, and we'll see how you like it at that time. Even so, at the end of the book, God has a message of promise for Judah. Chapter 3, verse 17. So you shall know that I am the Lord your God, who dwells in Zion on my holy mountain. And Jerusalem shall be holy, and strangers shall never again pass through it. In other words, nobody else will ever run this land. It will be yours. Verse 18, and in that day the mountains shall drip sweet wine, and the hills shall flow with milk, and all the stream beds of Judah shall flow with water, and a fountain shall come forth from the house of the Lord, and water the valley of Shittim. And he continues on about the desolation of the other countries. But he promises prosperity and peace and blessing in that day. But in order to get to that day of prosperity, we have to go through the judgment to purge the evil. Pretty common theme among the prophets, and kind of the same format that so many of them use, promising judgment for the evil, promising blessing to come after the judgment, promising the faithful of God and the return of his people someday. And that's the book of Joel. Just a short little book, isn't it? If they had Twitter, right? If they had Twitter social media back then, Joel would be one of God's Twitters to his people, Judah. Just a short little message, simple but easily understandable, and the message was clear. And yet they did not heed it. All right, we're also going to cover this morning the book of Hosea. Again, if you're already in Joel, which I hope you are at this point, just turn back a couple pages. It's the book directly before Joel. How convenient for us. And we're going to look at the book of Hosea. The book of Hosea talks about a match made in heaven, a romantic story indeed, where God plays the matchmaker for Hosea, although not in the way we'd usually expect. In fact, the dating advice that God gives Hosea is probably not one that I would relate to most people, because God was not really setting Hosea up with marital success in mind, if you know what I mean. In fact, he was setting him up to fail, wasn't he? God set Hosea's relationship up to fail on purpose for a reason. So this match made in heaven was truly God ordained, but it was not the kind that we would normally expect. The author, of course, was Hosea the prophet. The readers were the northern tribes of Israel again, if you can shift your mind back to the northern country, shortly before its exile. And again, I've seen kind of a little bit of variation of date range, but he gives us a pretty good timestamp here in chapter 1, verse 1. The word of the Lord that came to Hosea, the son of Beeri, in the days of Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, kings of Judah. So within the range of kings, somewhere. Not necessarily all the years of Uzziah or all the years of Hezekiah, but at least overlapping their reigns somewhat was this time. Also in the days of Jeroboam, son of Joash, king of Israel. So he gives us both nations' king timestamps as to when it was that he ministered. So we have a pretty solid idea of when he did his thing. If we could put it in a chart form, it'd look kind of like this. And I know this is not a comprehensive list of all the prophets, just kind of an outline in general. Got Elijah and Elisha there, who were recorded in the books of Kings. They didn't write their own Old Testament books. Then Jonah and Amos and those guys. Hosea is right there. You notice his little time bar ends around probably 720 to 730 BC. And again, if you remember your history, Israel was exiled around 722. So we think he probably did his ministry just leading up to and or leading up to the exile of Israel. So he was probably the last prophet, or at least the last prophet that wrote scripture to minister to the northern tribes before their final judgment. Again, one more perspective. If you remember this timeline from about 3 or 4 weeks ago, where Israel breaks into the two nations, Israel and Judah. You have the list of kings there. The exile is at the end of the top line there for Israel in 722. Amos and then Hosea are there listed kind of in approximately the time frame that they would have ministered right there. The message of the book of Hosea is this: Israel has been unfaithful to her husband Yahweh, to God, and so God will punish her, but then restore her to himself. Kind of a familiar theme in terms of message. That's kind of what most of the prophets say. But in the book of Hosea, God uses a very, very personal and very relationship-based way to get his message across. In Joel, he used an analogy of the locust to the armies, right? In Amos, he talked about the idolatry going on in Bethel and used a couple shepherding analogies. In Hosea, he uses very, very much a relationship analogy for his people and the relationship between himself and his people, I should say. And we'll look at that. The structure is kind of like this. Chapters 1 through 3 is the marital object lesson, and then the application of what all that means in the last 10 chapters of the book, 11 chapters of the book, chapters 4 through 14. So in chapter 1, verse 2, we're going to pick up the story, and here's how it goes. When the Lord first spoke to Hosea, the Lord said to Hosea, "Go, take yourself a wife of whoredom, and have children of whoredom, for the land commits great whoredom by forsaking the Lord." So he went and took Gomer, the daughter of Diblaim, and she conceived and bore him a son. So God came to Hosea. Hosea, it's time for you to get married. You've been a bachelor long enough. I want you to go find yourself a wife and be happy. And here's who I want you to find. I want you to think of the woman with the worst reputation you can possibly think of, who is completely unfaithful, absolutely unreliable, and totally immoral. And I want you to go marry her. As I said before, this is probably not the dating advice you're going to want to give to too many people. You can imagine how their Valentine's Day went, right? They're sitting there on the couch and she says, "Honey, remind me why you married me again?" And he says, "Well, because when God told me to look for a wife, he said, find somebody completely unreliable, completely immoral, and completely disaster of a woman." "Oh, thank you, dear. That's so lovely and romantic." I don't know how that went for sure, but that's what he did. So Hosea goes out and he finds the most disreputable woman, the most unreliable, the most unfaithful, conniving, cheating, lying woman he can find, and he marries her. And her name is Gomer. And again, Gomer, I don't know, it just doesn't sound attractive to me, I guess. I'm thinking of the guy with the funny accent from the 1950s TV show. I don't know. Maybe she was more attractive than that. I don't know. Hopefully she wasn't wearing a Marine's uniform. Whatever. So her name is Gomer. And this is the most disreputable woman he can find. And so he says, "I'm going to marry this woman because God says that's the girl for me." And so he goes and he marries her. And they have a son. Verse 4, and we pick it up. "And the Lord said, call the son's name Jezreel. For in just a little while I will punish the house of Jehu for the blood of Jezreel, and I will put an end to the kingdom of the house of Israel. And on that day I will break the bow of Israel in the valley of Jezreel." As I said, there's a lot of name play and word play going on throughout this book. Jezreel, the oldest son that they have, was also the name of a valley in Israel. It was the site of a terrible massacre in which Jehu, the king of Israel, killed Jezebel, Ahab's descendants, and Ahaziah, the king of Judah, and Joram, the preceding king of Israel, all of them, and several followers of Baal. So a massive battle, a massive massacre was going on in this valley. And so everybody knew when you talk about, it's like talking about Gettysburg. What do you think about when I say the name Gettysburg? You obviously think of what? The Civil War battle. Now, it actually is a place, there's fields there. I've never been there. It's an actual area, and a lot more has happened there than just the battle, but when you say Gettysburg, that's what it's known for. So you say Jezreel to the people back then, one of the things that would pop into their mind is this massive massacre that happened where a lot of people were killed, a lot of blood was shed. Now, keep in mind, while the execution of Jezebel and Ahab's sons were endorsed by God, in fact, it was predicted and commanded by him. So that was a good thing in accordance with God's word. And the judgment of Baal's priests were also commendable, killing the idolatrous priest. The slaughter of the king of Judah was not in God's plan. So that was an act of disobedience, but he kind of just broad brush killed everybody, and that was not good. So this was the basis for God's judgment on Jehu. He said, you killed the people that I wanted you to kill, but you also went overboard and killed some of my people you were not supposed to kill. So I am going to bring judgment on you now. And so that's all linked to the valley of Jezreel. But that's not the only thing that Jezreel was known for. Jezreel literally means God plants. So this valley, when it wasn't being overrun by soldiers and massacres, it was a very fertile valley with plenty of water. Many vineyards were there. Naboth's vineyard, for example. Does Naboth's vineyard sound familiar to anybody? That's the one that Ahab went out and killed the guy to get. And then Jezebel said, Ahab wanted it. He came back. He was crying in his temple. Jezebel, the queen, says, why are you crying? He says, because I wanted his vineyard and he won't sell it to me. So she goes out and has the guy killed. And the story goes back and forth. But Naboth's vineyard there in the valley of Jezreel. So two things Jezreel is known for. Vicious, violent massacre, but also fertile, plenteous, fruit-producing ground, a very fertile area, fertile for growing and for food and sustenance and all that stuff. So kind of the best of the best and the worst of the worst, and we'll see both play out here as Hosea uses the name Jezreel throughout his book. Continuing on in verse 6, she, Gomer, conceived again and bore a daughter. And the Lord said to him, call her name, and depending on which translation you have here, it might actually use the translation or the name Lo-Ruhamah. Lo-Ruhamah is her name, and that means no mercy. For I will no more have mercy on the house of Israel to forgive them at all. Poor little girl, she grows up with the name No Mercy. She goes to school and says, I've been grounded again. Wow, your parents are really tough on you. Well, my name is No Mercy, and there, I have no mercy. But the poor little girl, No Mercy is her name growing up, because God says, I'm going to have no more mercy on Israel because she's been so bad. Verse 7, but I will have mercy on the house of Judah, and I will save them by the Lord their God. I will not save them by the bow or by the sword or by war or by horses or by horsemen. And we saw God do that when Assyria attacked Judah for sure. So two kids now, Jezreel and Lo-Ruhamah. Oh, by the way, I forgot to show you. Here's a picture of the valley of Jezreel. I was going to put that up as I was describing it, and I totally forgot. But there's a picture that I pulled up of that area, and you can see how nice and flat and fertile it looks in the background. And so there it is. Lo-Ruhamah, the second child. Lo-Ruhamah literally means no mercy. But God does promise to have mercy on Judah. And true to his word, Israel was exiled in 722 by Assyria, but Judah was spared from the Assyrians in 701 by supernatural victory. If you remember, that's when Hezekiah takes the scroll, or takes the insults, and he brings them before God, says, look what they're saying about you, God. This is the letter they sent to taunt us, to taunt you, to compare you to all the other gods. What are we going to do? And God says, don't worry, I will take care of it. You guys just sit tight. And so that night, God sends out the angel of death, it says, to the Assyrian army camped somewhere outside the city. Wiped out, I always know that number, and I forgot that. 185,000 of their army, all their soldiers, all the top warriors that they have. And I love how it reads. It says, those survivors who didn't get killed woke up in the morning and says, there were all the dead bodies. And you can imagine that's exactly their expression. They rolled over in their tents and looked at each other and oh, everybody in my tent is dead except for me. And they flip out and freak out kind of, and they don't even take their stuff. They just go running back to Assyria, the few people that are left. And so God does spare them just like he said he would. Jezreel and Lo-Ruhamah, no mercy. There's one more kid that they have, continuing on in verse 8. When she had weaned no mercy, Lo-Ruhamah, she conceived and bore a son. And the Lord said, call his name, not my people. Lo-Ami, your translation might say, not my people. For you are not my people, and I am not your God. Why would he say that to Israel? I thought Israel was God's people. He was, and he will continue to be in the future. But at that point he says, you have disobeyed, you've gone so far from me that I'm going to turn my back on you, and I'm going to disown you for a while. At this point, right now, I am no longer your God. You can no longer come to me for help, and you are not my people. I will not treat you with any kind of favors at this point. I'm going to judge you just like everybody else. Someday I'll restore you. We'll get to that part. But for now, it's as good as I am not your God right now, because I will not bring you help or protection in any way. So Lo-Ami means not my people. God is disowning his rebellious people for a while. One day, the two nations would reunite with one leader, and God would Jezreel. He would replant them in a fertile area forever. Verse 10, he continues in chapter 1. Yet the number of the children of Israel shall be someday like the sand of the sea, which cannot be measured or numbered. And the place where it was said to them, you are not my people, here it shall be said to them, children of the living God, you are now my children and my people. And the children of Judah and the children of Israel shall be gathered together. That's different. That's like, again, if the South had won the Civil War and they did secede and we were two nations, it'd be like somebody coming back to us and say, someday you guys will be reunited into a United States and you'll no longer be divided. That's kind of what they're saying here. The southern tribes and the northern tribes will come back. They'll be reunited as one nation, have one leader. God will plant you in the land. Verse 11, and the children of Judah, the children of Israel will be gathered together. They shall appoint for themselves one head, and they shall go up from the land, for great shall be the day of, and here's the wordplay again, the day of Jezreel. Why does he say the day of Jezreel? What does he mean? Probably not talking about the massacre part of it in this situation. He's talking about the fertile growing part. I will plant you just like a crop, just like plants in the valley of Jezreel, and it's fertile and it's well watered, and you'll grow and you'll be strong and you'll be healthy and you'll be prosperous. Someday in that day that will happen. Chapter 2 uses the picture of Hosea's wife Gomer to speak to Israel, describing them as the adulteress who left her husband Yahweh to be with the Baals. Let me read you just a little bit about that. Chapter 2, we'll pick it up in verse 5. It says about the country. It says, for their mother has played the whore. She who conceived them has acted shamefully. For she said, I will go after my lovers who give me my bread and my water, and my wool and my flax and my oil and my drink. Therefore I will hedge up her way with thorns, and I will build a wall against her so that she cannot find her paths. She shall pursue her lovers, but not overtake them. Who are her lovers, by the way? Israel's lovers. Who are those? Those who she went to for protection and provision instead of God. Egypt, Assyria. There are other surrounding nations, because when Israel felt threatened or attacked, they didn't go to God for help. They went to the other nations. I'll make a deal with you. You protect me now. I'll pay you so much in gold or silver, or I'll give you these crops, or whatever it is, or whatever the deal was in the different situation. You come and protect us, because we're not going to go to God for our protection. Those are the lovers. She shall pursue her lovers, but not overtake them. She shall seek them, but not find them. Then she shall say, I will go and return to my first husband, for it was better for me then than now. And she did not know that it was I who gave her the grain and the wine and the oil, and who lavished on her silver and gold, which they used for Baal. They thought they were getting their profits from all the nations. I'm the one giving them the prosperity that they had, but they used the prosperity that I gave to them and all the riches and all the provisions. They used those things to worship the false gods and commit adultery against me, their true God. Verse 9, therefore I will take back my grain in its time and my wine in its season, and I will take away my food and my wool and my flax, which were to cover her nakedness. Now I will uncover her lewdness in the sight of her lovers, and no one shall rescue her out of my hand. If she wants to give credit to all the other nations, the provisions that I gave to her, just like Gomer and Hosea, where she said, I want to go find somebody more exciting, somebody who's richer, somebody who looks better, somebody who's not always writing these crazy prophecies for God. I want to be with somebody cool for a while. And so Gomer runs off, and she finds another lover. And that's just what Israel did too. I want to find somebody cooler than God. I want to find somebody more fun and attractive than who God is. And so she runs off to all these other nations, following all the false gods, saying, I want to be like them, I want to be like them, abandoning the true God. And God says, look, I'm the one who's taken care of you for all these years. I'm the one who gave you your sustenance and your provision and your blessing. And you're using all these things that I gave you to give them to somebody else and cheat on me, essentially, with all these other nations and all these other gods. So I'll take away my blessing. If you don't want to give me credit and follow me, if you want the stuff but don't want me, then I'll take the stuff and I'll leave as well. Continuing on here, where am I at? Verse 14, but he says, someday I will come back and I will rescue you as well. Chapter 2, verse 14, therefore, behold, I will allure her, and I will bring her into the wilderness, and I'll speak tenderly to her. And there I will give her her vineyards, and make the valley of Achor a door of hope. And there shall be answer as in the days in her youth. And at that time, when she came out of the land of Egypt. Continue in verse 16 here, where it says, in that day declares the Lord, you will call me my husband. Does anybody's translation have call me Ishi, something like that? Does anybody's translation have that? Maybe? Okay, no? All right. Never mind. I didn't say anything then. You will call me my husband, and no longer will you be my Baal, is what ESV. Does anybody have a translation that says something different than my Baal there? Maybe my master? Does somebody have one that says that? No? Nobody wants to admit it? Okay, that's fine. Listen to that verse, though, and verse 17. For I will remove the names of the Baals from her mouth, and they shall be remembered by name no more. Someday, God says, I'll take her into the wilderness. I'll have to judge her. I'll have to drive the evil from her. But I'll restore blessing to her in that day when she comes back to me. Someday she will come back to me, and she will call me my husband. And I put up there on the screen, I-S-H-I, husband, that's the word used there. They're going to call me husband, and once more we will be reunited as if a husband and a wife, and the relationship will be restored. And no longer will you call me my Baal. All kinds of stuff going on there. Why would they call God Baal? Baal, of course, was the name of what? The idols they were worshiping, but there's more going on there than just that. What is it? The word Baal there actually means, translated, it means master, the one whom I serve. And so all the times that they are serving the Baals, this pagan system of false gods and stuff that they picked up from the Canaanites, all the time they were serving the Baals, every time they say the Baals, they were saying the masters, the ones whom I serve, because that's what their name meant. So God says, at that time, not only will you forget the names of the Baals, the small g gods that you've been serving, but you won't even come to me as if I was your Baal, your master, because the relationship will look different at that time. At that time when I restore all things, you won't call me my master, which kind of, when he gives the law in the Old Testament economy and way of doing things, and even through the prophets, God oftentimes there is very much a servant-master relationship. Not that God doesn't love them more tenderly than that, but there is a lot of serving going on in the Old Testament times. Here's my law, here's what you must do. If you do this, I will bless you. If you don't, I will punish you, kind of like a master-servant relationship. But God says, in that day, not only will you have forgotten the name of the Baals that you serve, the false gods, you won't even call me or see me as your Baal, your master. You will instead see me as what? As a husband. The relationship will be totally changed, won't it? Yeah, because someday when you come back to me, it will be a much closer relationship. And sure enough, with the coming of the Messiah, that relationship has indeed changed. God uses the illustration not only in Hosea, but throughout the Bible, of a husband-wife relationship with his people multiple times. And especially in that day when they were reunited, it will be much more close than even it was back here in this day. So he says, they will be my husband, or I will be their husband. And there will be that kind of closeness with them. Verse 18, and I will make for them a covenant on that day with the beasts of the field and the birds of the heavens and the creeping things on the ground, and I will abolish the bow and the sword and war from the land, and I will make you lie down in safety, and I will betroth you to me forever. I will betroth you to me in righteousness and in justice, in steadfast love and in mercy. I will betroth you to me in faithfulness, and you shall know the Lord. and I'll bring you back to myself, and I can be kind, and I can be merciful, and I can give you provision, all the things, because the wickedness will have been paid for and eliminated from your midst, and we can have that kind of relationship. I assume it's choir practice time. All right, we'll close up here in just a second. So God will eliminate the war and grant prosperity and return to Israel in faithfulness and blessing until he Jezreels, until he plants those on which he Ruhamas, has mercy, his people, his Ami. And you can see all the wordplay coming on here. Hosea then illustrates this reunion in chapter 3. And here's what he says in chapter 3, and we'll end with this chapter. Verse 1, and the Lord said to me, Hosea, go again and love a woman who is loved by another man. In other words, go find the wife that left you but is sleeping with somebody else, and is an adulteress, even as the Lord loves the children of Israel, though they turn to other gods and love cakes of raisins, a form of worship of the idols. Hosea says, so I brought her for 15 shekels of silver and a homer and a lethish of barley. So 15 shekels of silver and about 9 bushels of barley. He says, I went out and I found her, and I paid off this other guy she was with, or whoever owned her, or she was living with, or whatever, said, look, I'll give you 15 pieces of silver and 9 bushels of barley for this woman if you'll give her back to me. And the guy says, probably a good deal. I can get somebody else for less than that. So sure, I'll trade you. And so the lover, or the adulterer guy who's sleeping with Gomer said, sure, that's a fair trade. So Hosea buys her back for this price. Verse 3, and I said to her, you must dwell as mine for many days. You must not play the whore or belong to another man. So will I also be to you. For the children of Israel shall dwell many days without king or prince, without sacrifice or pillar, without ephod or household gods. But afterward the children of Israel shall return and seek the Lord your God and David their king, and they shall come in fear to the Lord and to his goodness in the latter days. So God says, they have abandoned me, they've gone to their other gods, they are living with somebody else in effect right now. And God says they're going to live that way for many, many days. And in fact, it has been many, many days when God says they will be without a king, without a country, without pillar, he says, without a city or a civilization, without a nation. They'll be this way for a long, long time. But someday, he says, I will bring them back to myself, and I will pay the nations for what they have done, and I will buy her back. I will buy her back at my own price. I will redeem them by myself paying the cost that it takes to get them back. Of course, he did when he came as Messiah. And he paid the price so that he can buy them back. And someday he will reunite them and say, look, I have bought you back with my own blood. Now you can come back and worship me, but you must not do this again. And they won't. And they'll come back and they'll be faithful to him. And because they're faithful to him, he blesses them again. And they are reunited just like Hosea and Gomer were reunited after he bought her back from the other guy that she was living with. And now they can be a family again. And God uses that picture as what he will do with his own people. There's more application through the rest of the book, but we'll have to get to that next week. But what an interesting, fascinating picture God gives between himself and his people. Not just you should do this and you should do that, but he reveals how he really feels about them. He emphasizes not just the wrong that they did or the judgment coming, but the relationship and how much it has hurt him personally by what they've done and why he has to bring this judgment upon them and how he sees them, but how he longs to be reunited with them. And again, although we are not Israel today, we don't have all the promises and stuff that Israel does, still he feels the same way about us because he loves us as well. And boy, when we stray away from him, he says, oh, this is bad. I want to be reunited with you. And all the nations are that way. All right, let's pray and we'll dismiss. Dear God, we thank you this morning for this look into both Joel and Hosea, both warnings, both prophets from you to warn us of the sinfulness that we have incurred, specifically Israel and Judah at this time and when they left you. And by extension, of course, we can see so much of ourselves and their behavior. I pray that we'd be more faithful to you, hopefully, than what Israel was. And yet we know oftentimes we are not. Be kind to us, be patient with us, and thank you for sending your son to buy us back, just like you told Hosea to do with Gomer, to buy us back to yourself, to provide a way for us to be reunited with you so we can live with you forever the way that we should be. And help us to remember that picture so that we want to be faithful to you. In Jesus' name I pray, amen.